Welcome to Unit 3A, Learning Theories and Point A. Identify 3 types of cognitive load and how you work with each. We'll start by examining Figure 3-2 in your chapter. That figure shows a number of different memory theories and associated design tips. We'll start at the top of that figure at cognitive load theory. Cognitive load explains the weight of information in memory, and intrinsic load refers to the nature of the content and its level of complexity. Extraneous load can be thought of as the type of noise or superfluous elements in the communication that act as barriers to learning. Germane load can be thought of as those things that a designer does to facilitate optimal learner load. For example, textual techniques that reinforce the content, such as chunking, sequencing, providing analogies, can help people understand new information more quickly. What's interesting about online learning environments is that they pose a threat to optimal cognitive load just due to the number of choices that are available to a learner. For example, here's a computer game, and I'm not sure it has any learning component to it or not, but it's typical of educational games. There are lots of controls that a learner is supposed to choose from, and there are lots of different menu options, and overall, there's quite a bit of extraneous load. I'm sure there's ways that some of this information on the screen could be reduced. Another interface that has a high cognitive load is also, again, interfaces that are common when you're online or when you're looking at electronic learning. And here's a picture from my Facebook page. As you can see, we've gotten really used to it, but there's quite a bit of extraneous information here. It's nice to have all of the tasks out in front of you, but the design for this could probably be cleaner. So do you think extraneous load could be reduced in the design of these interfaces? And I think the answer to that is definitely it could be reduced. For example, over here it says people you may know. I don't really need that. Maybe an option up here saying extras would help. As far as this computer game, I can see that it's supposed to look like the panel of some type of vehicle. So what could be reduced on the panel? If you look at a typical car panel in an automobile, you're not going to see this many options. We would not give automobile drivers a dashboard that had so many options on it. If we did, we'd be competing with traffic and things that might make driving unsafe. So you have to ask the question of why do we have so many extraneous elements in instructional interfaces? We don't do it to drivers. Why are we doing it to learners? Extraneous load is really the type of load that we can almost do the most about it. And I use this diamond design process throughout this class because it's very helpful. And it represents the number of tasks that you might have when you're designing. When you begin a design, you start adding elements, and you can see these little X's added. And as you're designing, it's just natural. You start adding more and more and more elements until you reach a place right here, the widest part of the diamond. And at that point, it's time to stop and say, you know, what can we get rid of? So then there's this removal of anything that might be extraneous. So in the end, you end up with a very clean design. Many, many novice designers stop here at the very middle part of the diamond where they have too many extraneous variables. So when we talk about the diamond design process, we're going to talk about that natural process of adding a lot of things and then really needing to go back and remove many of them. Okay, we've covered extraneous load. Let's look at germane load. as a designer, when you increase germane load, what you're doing is you are coming up with ways to make the information meaningful. Analogies and metaphors are really good examples of efforts made to increase germane load. For example, if you're trying to teach how hard it is to do design and how much work is involved, a picture of an iceberg would be a great analogy, because what you see on the surface of the water is really not much compared to the iceberg that lies underneath. And it's a good metaphor for how much work it takes to come up with good designs. Intrinsic load cannot change. I chose this image here because it covers visual literacy. And visual literacy is definitely a high intrinsic load topic because a lot of elements in visual literacy interact. And when you have a lot of elements within a domain or a topic area that interact, we call that high element interactivity. And it makes it hard to both teach and learn. A, B, C, D are all elements that interact. They are an example themselves of a high intrinsic load. You can't really talk about any of those variables without thinking about the impact on the other variables. So ABCD is a good example of high intrinsic load. We can't really change it. What we can do, though, is make the instructional strategies more germane and to reduce as much noise as possible. So stop and think, what have you learned? So go ahead and take a minute or two and try to match the items. Germane load is the type of load based on meaningful content. Extraneous load is the type of load based on excessive and often distracting information. Intrinsic load is a load based on the nature of instructional content. When there is a high degree of element interactivity, this load is high. As designers, what we want to do is increase germane load. That's why that weight is the largest. We want to decrease the extraneous load. And again, we cannot change intrinsic load.